Morning. Feel free to find a seat. All right, good morning. Thank you for being here this morning, and I just appreciate everybody's time and investment in what we're trying to accomplish here. So thank you for your interest in that. The attendance and participation is a good indicator that you have a strong interest in the workforce of our great state. And happy to have everybody here. So we'll get started. And Nikisha, if you want to call roll, we'll make it official.
Good morning, everyone. All right. As I call your name, if you can please confirm your attendance and also state any local board you might represent. If you happen to be representing by proxy, please state your name for the record. Rogers Anderson.
Present, Northern Middle.
Martha Axford.
Present, East.
All right. Senator Paul Bailey. All right. Sherelle Kimball Street.
Charles Bryson, by proxy.
Thank you. Jason Bates.
Present.
Tim Berry.
Present.
Representative Clark Boyd. All right. Ronnie Brewer. Thank you. John Clark. Michelle Falcon. Ann Hatcher. Christine Hopkins. Warren Logan.
Present, area 5.
Commissioner Dr. Jeff McCord. Vonda McDaniel. Casey Hognerin. Thank you. All right. Greg Persinger. Stuart Price.
Present.
Ann Thompson. Kevin Vaughn. Tony Nicknajad. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. And I just want to remind everybody that we are streaming live on YouTube for all the thousands of people who are interested in what we're doing here today. So I'm sure they're tuning in. But I say that so that you remember we're on camera and voice is also being streamed. So just keep those things in mind. We need to approve the minutes from the last meeting. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to look those over. Any questions or a motion to approve the minutes? Motion to approve by Vonda. Got a second by Rogers. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of making the minutes approved as presented, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The minutes are approved. Commissioner McCord, let us know what's been going on.
I have no idea. No,
I don't believe that for a
I
minute.
was just teasing. I probably should not do that. Since we've got thousands of people watching on YouTube. Just very quickly, a few comments. First of all, thank you for being here, for your service to this board and to the people of Tennessee. And we talk about this all the time. It really is high purpose work. As you come in and you learn about how an organization works, it's evident that this board and the local boards that are connected to it are what you can think of are the hinge that swings big doors. And part of what my talking points will be as I continue visits around the state is how important it is to get your best and brightest on those local boards, because that's where the execution's going to happen, and this department can't do anything without that excellence in those local boards. So thank you for those who run and serve on those boards. As far as the department goes, we are in the process of a 4-year planning window, and so we'll talk about where we want to be in 4 years, and then we will go year by year to get there. I think this is the first time, at least in a long time, that that sort of far look has happened. Typically, we do it year by year. But at the end of the day, we're going to be the best workforce development system in the country. And we have to operationalize what that means, but that's what we're going to be in 4 years. And to that end, we have done some organizational changes in our department. And if you're going to be the best at what you do, you need the people who are the best at what they do. And so as a part of that reorganization, Denise has been promoted to Deputy Commissioner of Workforce Learning and Development. So we can give it up for her right now. Yeah, that's okay. And so what that means is she'll have responsibility for workforce services like she currently does. She's 2 roles right now, adult education, and then our data and analytics piece, which is going to be key if we're going to get to where we want to be as the best. We, again, she's wearing 2 hats now. We will replace her position sometime in the near future. But I know you who have met her and know her have all the confidence, just like I do, that we have the right person to take us where we need to go. Last thing, and I'll let Denise talk about this a little bit, we had a very positive meeting with Senator Alexander about where we always can go. And we're working with some sister states to put some things together so that we can execute and maybe even have a little more flexibility than we do now with his help. So with that, I just want to thank you again for being here, and I hope you've been enjoying Nashville. I only know 3 or 4 streets, so you might have to ask somebody else if you need to get around. But anyway, thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you very much. And Deputy Commissioner Thomas, would you please give us a quick update on workforce services?
I will. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to our board members and our guests. So just a couple of things. We've been pretty busy since the last board meeting. I want to update you on some things that were presented to you for the first time at the previous meeting, and then share a couple of items with you that are still in review that may carry over into our August meeting. First of all, this board was very intentional about evaluation of our entire workforce system. As you know, this board approved for us to work with Ernst & Young to do a capacity and evaluation study of our 9 local areas. They are continuing to do the work. They have provided us preliminary reports as we go along. Their entire report will be completed by June 30. They will be available to this board at the August meeting to do a full presentation to you on their findings, and will be around in case there's questions or additional work or guidance that is needed from their perspective. So I wanted to update you on that. We also are in the thick of review, so we will have lots of folks on the ground from our federal partners over the course of the summer. We are expecting a review on our youth program from USDOL, also our partners from the Senior Community Services Employment Program, and also our partners at USDA for SNAP Employment and Training, along with Department of Human Services. And we are expecting USDOL to be here on Monday to review our Fort Campbell Strong project. As you know, again, this board was instrumental in that project being implemented. And so we will be looked at, and hopefully that we're found doing exactly what we are expected to do. In addition, our state plan modification, again, that this board ratified, was approved and accepted by U.S. Department of Labor. So our modification is approved, but it really segues right over into our new planning cycle. As you know, a new plan will be required for 2020. So we're already having partner meetings with other agencies as we start to look at those initiatives that are meaningful to the governor and to this board. And so we are embarking on our planning. We've also started a lot of our on-site technical assistance to our local areas. It was very important to this body that we are visible and we're out front and really working seamlessly with the local areas. And so we've completed 3 of the 9. And these are on-site visits where we take our expertise to them and really get an idea of what needs are on the ground, as opposed to just looking at it through the windows here in Nashville. So we'll continue to do that. Our Rapid Response and Reemployment Conference will take place July 2019 in Opryland. We always invite our board members to be present if they so choose for those type of gatherings. Our WIOA convening was exceptional this year, and I really want to thank the board members who were there and those who participated. I know we had several that sat on boards and also attended as well, and thank you for your support. It was very instrumental. We were honored to have our very own governor be the opening speaker for that event. We look forward to more engagement to really spotlight what we're doing here in our state. So to talk further through our meeting with Senator Alexander, there were a couple of things on the docket. One, it was important to always know, him really being a chief architect of the act, how we're carrying it out here in our state, and what are some challenges at the policy level that we're having. One thing that was paramount, we talked a little bit in Ops Committee this morning about this, is the funding allocation. We really are, in some ways, restricted by a very antiquated formula allocation on how money is divvied out to the local areas. And with a rural initiative as aggressive as the one that Governor Lee has embarked upon, it's important that we can have the funds follow the initiative and the need. And so one of the things we're asking for is additional flexibility that will allow a governor to have more discretionary control over how the funds are released to the non-local areas. And so we believe if the governor can have a greater impact on that, as the economic conditions in the state change, he has the flexibility to quickly earmark additional dollars. So we're working on that, as well as some other source of funds such as trade that are very restricted in their use. We want, again, those funds to be able to be utilized by our governor to carry out workforce development activities in the state. So stay tuned. We got a pretty direct charge in that meeting. So we're working with Washington State and Senator Patty Murray. As you know, they co-authored the act. So we're going to work with them along with some other states, one in our southeast region in Alabama and Pennsylvania being another, and Virginia is the other. We're going to work with them so that we can put together one white paper that is issued through the National Association of State Workforce Agencies and get that to them. WIOA is due for reauthorization. Believe it or not, it seems like this board just approved the initial plan, but it will be 5 years in July. And so it's up for reauthorization for 2020. And so we want to make our voice and our needs heard early so that we can shape policy at the federal level. And lastly, I just want to mention that we had the immense pleasure of having our comptrollers come in and perform a performance audit for us. And so we have a great relationship with our comptroller, and Commissioner McCord has led that effort. And so we look at it as an opportunity to learn on what we're doing right and what we need to improve upon. And so we welcome input. It's a painful process, but it's a learning process. And so they reviewed the WIOA cluster. And so for full transparency to this board, it's important for you to hear not only the evaluation of the local areas, but how we're doing at the state level as well. And so as a result of that audit, we had 3 findings. And one was around eligibility and case notes that they found when they looked at several cases around the local areas, that there wasn't enough proof of why someone was enrolled in training, or there was doubt around eligibility or exits of things of that nature. So that can lead to questionable costs, so we understand the finding. We have put out additional guidance. We will continue to provide technical assistance, and we will be revamping a fairly comprehensive enrollment policy that contains all of the recommendations from the Comptroller's Office that will be before this board in August. The other 2 were around reporting and earmarking. One was around our incumbent worker training. It's always nice to know when the draft report hits, we've already had the fix in place. And so for both of those findings, the fix was already in place by the time the report was published, and the Comptroller's Office is pleased with those 2 changes. So we didn't come out completely unscathed, but we'll take 3 any day over 33. So we're well on our way, and so we just appreciate this board, and we thought it was important for you to know where we still have some challenges and where we're working. So we appreciate your patience, and we'll continue to keep you apprised as we provide our 6-month update back to the Comptroller's Office. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's my report.
That audit results is obviously a good indicator of how well your department is run, and it speaks well to all the staff that have continue to do a great job of keeping things running smoothly. What a great, well-oiled machine. Thank you. I want to take a minute to acknowledge a new board member. Representative Boyd is now with us. Good to see you. Thank you for joining the board. Thank you for joining the board, and just want to acknowledge your participation in here. Let's get an update on adult education from Assistant Commissioner Ian White.
Good morning. That doesn't move. All right. Deputy Commissioner Thomas came to me and asked me to do a high-level overview of adult education for new board members. So I'm going to start with the high-level overview and then move into new initiatives that we have ongoing in our planning in adult education. So adult education is Title II of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. Adult education is tasked with offering educational services and training services to individuals that are basic skills deficient, have low levels of literacy, or lack their high school equivalency diploma. And so within that framework, there's three different areas that adult education focuses in. There's the adult basic education, which focuses on those low-level literacy folks. There's the English language learners, or English as a second language society, and then there's also the integrated education, migrant, immigrant workers, or refugees that are in the state of Tennessee to work, so that way that they can make a living and assimilate into our society. So our education is focused around contextualized instruction for individual needs. So that's based on whether it's for an academic purpose, on whether they're wanting to go into higher education, preparation for the high school equivalency, which is what we're best known for, and then also job function improvement and training. That's somewhat newly defined within the law, and that's something that we're building on moving into the future. It's also used for providing instruction for improved communication and community involvement. So the civics piece of it, for those individuals, they can come in and learn rights as an individual living in this country, voting rights, things of that sort. So underneath the traditional ABE grant, many of you might be familiar with this because of Governor Lee's new initiative for reentry. So within the ABE funding, up to 20% of those funds can be used for corrections education. So many of our programs are partnered with local jail facilities to offer educational services to those inmates. And currently, last we checked, there's about 74 to 75 correctional facilities that are being partnered with those local programs. And since the new initiative announcement from the governor, we've had other local jails start reaching out and wanting to partner with our programs to provide that education. New under the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act is what's called an Integrated Education and Training Program. So that is pushing adult ed more into the realm of actual technical training and technical education for a specific job, career cluster. So that way, we're not only preparing them academically, we're also preparing them to function on the job. Something that's very new is that some of the funding for Title II is being reappropriated and assigned for pre-apprenticeship purposes, which is new to adult ed across the nation. So as more information comes out on that, then we'll start moving into that space and seeing how we might be able to collaborate with partners for that purpose. So updates on our data currently, the data pulled this morning. So currently we have 10,661 participants in our program throughout the year since July 1st. Of level gains, we have 1,285, and just a brief description on what a level gain is. That's based on a pre-test assessment and then a post-test assessment to gauge whether a person has improved in their mathematics understanding or reading. And then also for diplomas, we have 2,383 from July 1st to date. One thing that we've been pushing with our programs to move into this space of training and preparing people for employment is challenging our partners to partner with employers within their areas. So we've been asking them to report the employers that they contact and are working with and providing instruction to employees. And so we've had about around 20 or so employees that have been contacted or are being collaborated with to provide that type of instruction for their employees. Some update for West Tennessee. So over the past couple of months, we've been going through a competition for West Tennessee for the Northwest, Southwest, and the greater Memphis areas. And so that competition is coming to an end. The purpose of that competition is to improve the service delivery taking place. We had a minimal amount of providers in those areas, so we're trying to get additional providers to provide services to better serve the participants in those areas. So that announcement will be coming out at the end of next week. We'll post that and make everyone aware of who those grant recipients are. Some new initiatives that adult education is working on is that, historically speaking, adult ed has been a little bit dated with how instruction is offered. We've had a few one-off systems with distance education, but none of those really meet the full needs of our participants. So one initiative that adult education is working on is identifying an LMS system so that way we can provide coursework and instructional resources to teachers and students, so that way they can access it from a distance. So that would be key for rural areas if they're able to have that internet connection. And then it's also valuable for our teachers in class. It'll empower our teachers to better follow how our students are progressing through the system by keeping track of all the student data in that system. So part of that is that we're seeking a partnership with TBR, and we're in discussions with them on how that coursework looks and how it is going to best benefit our participants. So that's on top of the LMS piece of it, we're also looking to partner with higher ed in order to provide that detailed coursework. Another initiative that we're looking at, this is very high level, we haven't gotten into the specifics of it, but many states around the nation are doing this. It's what's referred to as an alternative diploma. So you're used to hearing about people sitting for the high school, the HiSET for their high school equivalency diploma, but many states have defined different alternatives to that, to where it's based on portfolio credits with higher ed, and then they're awarded a high school diploma or that high school equivalency. And so sometimes that fits the need for that individual more so than going to sit for a standardized test, because maybe they just want to go and become a welder, and that doesn't necessarily require sitting for that high-level, high-standard exam. As a part of that, another pilot program that we're working on instituting is co-enrollment with a TCAT. So with that, we've seen models in Washington State. They've been doing this for about 15 years, called the IBEST model. And so how that works is that instead of the technical institution working on remediation for an individual and putting the funds towards that, they partnered with their adult education program and invited the instructor into that class and teach alongside that technical instructor. So that way the remediation is happening at the same time that they're learning about the information that they need to earn that certificate. So that's in the works. We're looking to pilot with a TCAT, a technical college, to do that. And so we're excited about that because that might blend into how the alternative diploma might operate as well. So, and then another piece of that co-enrollment, what we've been looking at is, and I've spoke about this at the convening, is looking at how the NCRC might be leveraged. We know that several different institutions and providers are utilizing the NCRC as a method to provide credits to someone who is enrolling in a community college or TCAT. So that's another initiative that we're working on. First, we have to get a handle on how that operates and how adult ed fits into that space, and then work towards that co-enrollment piece. So that's a high-level overview of adult ed and some of the new initiatives that we have. I'd be happy to take any questions, but hopefully this shows that we're working towards being more of that technical education piece than just that high school equivalency.
Thank you. Any questions for Ian? Yes.
First of all, I just want to say that was awesome. It's really exciting to see some new initiatives coming in that help fit more individuals across Tennessee. Just maybe a follow-up on the next one, if you could help us understand more, if an individual goes through and use the example of welding and doesn't need to have like the full-blown HiSET test, will the certificate or the diploma or whatever it is that they get, will that also allow them to transition into a different career in the future? So if they're welding and then maybe they end up, this isn't the right fit, I want to be an accountant, are they going to have to go back to the bottom, or is this something that will get them to that level playing field? Just something to think about.
Absolutely. And to build a little bit more on that, what other states have done is a portfolio model to where it's a demonstration of competency for a specific subject area based on maybe they took math courses in their welding, so it's fulfilled that need. And so we're relying on some other states. We're looking at how that's operating with them so that we can build on that in the future.
That's really
Yeah, Rogers,
If I could have you come back.
you just thought you were done.
So, last night I had the opportunity to speak to GED equivalent. And as I was listening to a couple of the speakers last night and then driving in this morning, there was a young lady that was getting her GED in welding, which I'm a little old-fashioned, but I love to see that. And then there was another gentleman that spoke that was in his mid-30s that was in the music industry and had number one, number two hits in the Christian music world and decided to go back. And I thought that was very encouraging. But I was sitting here, as I sat here this morning, are all of our GEDs now going through the Tennessee Labor Workforce Development? Or are there still funds being used over in the BEP?
I'm not familiar with BP, so I don't believe so. But we're not the sole provider of those types of services. There's nonprofits that offer similar basic education services around the state, and those individuals are able to go and sit for that high school equivalency and earn their diploma as well. They don't have to come through our program.
There are no BEP funds being spent on, so any state supported is coming through labor.
I'm a little slow, but
That's
so there are
okay.
no funds going through BEP for GED.
For adult basic education, correct, which is GED. And so the funding, actually it's federal funding, comes through the Department of Labor, and that's where that educational system is for folks, for adults 17 and older who do not have a high school diploma. Yeah, all that from a state standpoint comes through the Department of Labor and Workforce Development.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question. Oh,
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt.
that's okay. How many working age adults, Ian, do not have a high school diploma?
So for 18 to 64 is around 433,000 in the state of Tennessee. If you add in those past that working age, it's more around, I believe, 700,000. So there's quite a few to serve.
One quick question on your data that you mentioned earlier. I think you said you've served 10,000 plus individuals this year. And I'm curious how many of those, or if you track, how many of those are employer-initiated engagements? Do you know about that? And then a follow-up question would be the criticality of having employer-defined need. I know you mentioned that, but what do we have in place that's a formal driving, equipped group that's speaking into that?
So we don't track that right now. I think that we could get that data for those that are involved with those programs on, is it their improvement on that job? Is that the question? And then also the formalized process of actually creating those types of programs with employers?
Well, and maybe more specifically, that I believe that a good function or a number of the people that could be engaged would occur through their employer. And so I don't know if you track that or how that happens versus an individual pursuing it through awareness, however they become aware of it. And then also how important it is that we make sure that it's tailored to the employer's needs, whatever they are out there, right? And so we have a good sense of that in trade skills, I understand, but that's an ongoing conversation that hopefully there's a group that's in play and engaged of stakeholders that are speaking into that. And I was curious if there is anything in place right now that meets that.
So not on the adult education side, there's the business services unit, and I'm sure Denise will be able to speak more to that, to where they engage employers and figure out what those needs are. A lot of the partnerships from adult education might reach out to an employer and offer up these services, but a lot of employers say, we're not really concerned with it right now. We have scenarios like Tyson, where they specifically sought us out, and because they have a high number of immigrant workers or English language learners, and so they've invited us in to their facility, And the coordinator in that area and the instructors will devise instruction and curriculum around that job so that they're learning the terms and what they need to know and reading signs and policy handbooks for that specific job. So it is adaptable where we want to work with employers to provide that contextualized instruction for their needs.
Very good. That's going to be a growing need for everyone, not just for businesses like Tyson. So that we can take the lead and initiate that would be certainly a great thing for the state. So
Absolutely.
thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just comment on that too, Stuart. That's where we're going, exactly on that 4-year, because you think about 400 and some odd thousand people, that's pipeline. And you think about those people, they show up, have the courage to go knock on a door and try to do better, and they keep showing up, keep showing up. That's exactly who I want to hire. And so our mindset on getting those folks co-enrolled or dual enrolled with a TCAD or a community college at the same time they're finishing. And so a lot of what has to be worked on is confidence. But this is a old Georgia expression, the want to is there. And so I think that's a big opportunity for us in the state to differentiate ourselves and move and also just improve the lives of those folks in our communities, our employers. Everybody wins when we can engage that. So thank you for that question.
So I had a question, if I could. So when I was listening to you describe the alternative high school equivalency, and it was putting me in the mindset of when individuals return back to secondary education and they get certain credits for having work experience in a particular area. And so I'm curious about if that is a portion of how they can earn the alternative and how that works out. What comes to my mind is my grandfather working a job for years and years and years, and then when he was in his 60s, they changed the requirements that you had to have a high school diploma to have the job. So he went back to school, literally, in his 60s to get a high school diploma for a job he was already doing. So how are we going to address those types of needs?
So we haven't gotten into the details to that extent yet, but that's exactly what we're looking at doing, is using that experience to say, depending on that job, what the reading level that they had to be at, or if they're using math. If they were in construction for 30 years, it's, they're kind of fulfilling that need already through their competency, and it's been demonstrated. And then with the credit piece of it, you mentioned going back to the secondary schooling. So I believe Alabama, the way that their alternative diploma works is that they'll look at what did they do well in when they were in secondary schooling and say, well, they don't need to work on that. They passed all those classes, but maybe it was just science and math that they struggled in. And so using what they had already accomplished and then focusing on those areas to maybe there's competency based on their employment, or maybe they earn some credits at a technical school that could fulfill that need, and then issuing a diploma to them. So in Alabama, they actually issue a high school diploma for a person approaching their adult ed program through that alternative pathway. And so that's what we want to structure it similarly, and we're kind of learning from other states around the nation on how because everybody's doing it somewhat different, and we're going to try to take best practices from each of those.
And you had a question as well? Okay. And then, go ahead, Kevin.
Do we know how that number got so high that didn't have a diploma, and is there something that we're doing to make sure it doesn't exceed that number?
Back in World War II is when it really jumped, and that's where the GED came from. That's why you see it increase so much. This is my opinion, this anecdotal, that's why the working age, they're aging out of that 18 to 64 range. So you have working age 18 to 64, which is 433,000. Then if you add in those past the working age, it goes up to 700,000. So I think that it has a large part to do with it. But then just also on top of dropout rates with the high schools.
Just as a follow-up, Commissioner, maybe you can answer this. What percentage are veterans and what percentages are male, female?
And we can, I don't have that information readily available, but those sticking with the program, we've seen it largely female and lower rates of male participation.
Can you give me a rough percentage of female, male?
I'm guessing 60% female, maybe 40% male.
So have you follow-up. Have you dug down into that? Why are we having more females dropping out?
Oh, you asked dropped out. I thought you meant enrolled in our programs. I'm not sure about the dropout rate. I'm sorry. I thought you were asking about enrolled in our program.
I could understand, so I guess I need to clarify. Do we know?
The
what
dropout
drop-
rate.
Yeah, the reversal of that. I could see why more females would be in it.
Right. And I'm not sure with the secondary schools. I don't know what that rate is across those demographics.
Thank you.
We'd have to look to our education brothers and sisters to help us with that, get us that number. You probably have it, don't you?
Yes, we can pull that, but I will say in terms of our graduation rates, over the past 20 years, those have been going up each year. The last 2 years, we have hit a historical max in the state of Tennessee, and so that graduation rate is now bumping up against the 90% mark, which means a lot less folks who are entering into society without that high school diploma. But that has been a pretty steady increase over the last, particularly the last 10 years, but the past 20 years. So I think that as folks age, that number will continue to decrease, we hope. But we can look into the demographics of who is dropping out.
Yeah, in addition to that demographics, do we understand why they're dropping out? So, we can understand male, female, but is there any information that's being gathered to say, what's the reasoning for them to drop out? Is it financial issues? Is it, issues at home? Is it, some are, I'm bored of high school and I want to get out and do something different. So I think that would be interesting to understand the reason behind the why, so we can help solve that problem.
So Casey, maybe that's a brief topic at the next meeting. That would be great. Excellent discussion, excellent questions. Ian, great job. Thank you for presenting that. And I think we're all pretty excited about everything that program is doing. Okay, let's get, moving on, let's get an update on unemployment from Assistant Commissioner Rusty Feltz.
Good morning, everyone. You're never quite sure when you get asked to do this as the guy in charge of unemployment whether to duck on the way up or, wear a rubber suit or what. But this has always been friendly confines, so not a big deal. Denise, thank you for the opportunity to speak and share something with this crowd. First of all, let me tell you why I'm here today, and that's to once again acknowledge and hopefully strengthen the partnership that we have with Workforce Services, and to share an idea that I approached Denise about not too long ago, and she bought in 100% and gave her full support. So I wanted to share that with you guys, and I hope that you'll find this exciting news. First, a little history of what I'm going to share with you. As you all know, states have been encouraged to modernize their unemployment insurance programs around the country and replace old mainframe systems. And while we can all acknowledge the use of technology is a good thing, and we can make progress that way, when you go too far sometimes and leave a certain percentage of your customer base behind, that's not good. So what we're going to do is, that has left our department, Labor and Workforce, I think a little misunderstood. When we have unemployed claimants come into a career center seeking help, and you guys are not allowed to help them in that capacity, I think it leaves us in a bad light and puts you all in a bad position. So the idea that we've come up with, and we want to get started in the state of Tennessee, is we want to reintroduce an unemployment insurance footprint back into career centers, like we used to have it, where we do a little face-to-face help for those that need it. I originally addressed Denise with this idea, and she was all in from the get-go. She said, Rusty, I think we need to do this. We have gone a little too far, and we've got a big percentage of our customer base that still need our help. Then we transitioned to our new commissioner, Commissioner McCord, and he was in hook, line, and sinker, and instantly labeled it Rusty's hybrid model for unemployment insurance. So that's what we have, that's what we are going to start with. It also fell in line with Governor Lee's, one of his first directives called the Rural Impact Plan. How can we get back out in the state and help people in rural areas? And so that's where the biggest percentage of these people that need help are. You know, we talk openly in the state of Tennessee about having literacy issues and even more so computer literacy issues. And we talk about internet issues and all that, but that's the only way you've been able to file for unemployment the last 3 years. And so we're going to back up a little bit and correct some of that. So here's the how. I don't know that completely, so the how, because I have budget restraints and unemployment insurance, we're going to try to accomplish through attrition. As we lose jobs and people promote and leave us in the unemployment insurance claims operations unit, what we're going to try to do is use those positions to put them back out in areas of the state. It would be nice if I did not have a budget restraint and I could go out and hire somebody, part-time or full-time, for every center in the state. That would be my goal, but that's not possible. So what we're going to do is at the 1st of June, we're making some arrangements with a couple of new hires, people that have unemployment experience, and the moving around of some staff that we already have. By June 1st, in West, East, and Middle Tennessee, we're going to have somebody in centers in those areas of the state, and we're going to spend a whole month gathering important data to better know what our goals need to be, and then begin with the staffing project after we've gathered all our data and are ready to start completely. Our goal with this idea is to offer more effective customer service because we're not doing a great job at it right now. When people can't file unemployment over the internet or they have a problem certifying for their weekly benefits over the internet, the first thing they do is they try to call. And the call volume is, even in slow times, it's too much for us to answer them immediately. So they have to leave a ticket. So that's not satisfactory because they're worried about that check getting there, and rightfully so. So whether it takes us half a day or it takes us 2 days to answer the ticket, we're going to try to eliminate that concern from their mind and offer better customer service. The other thing we're going to try to accomplish with this goal is the first thing Denise said. She always reminds me of this, is we're going to put Tennessee dislocated workers where they belong. We're going to put them back in career centers where they can get some qualified UI help if needed, and then that will place them in your hands for expertise with educational and employment reentry options, et cetera. All right? So the timeline. So far, I haven't been told this is too aggressive, but it may be. We want a representative from unemployment insurance in all or most AJCs by the end of this year so that we're ready for the winter spike in unemployment claims. Yes, ma'am, comprehensive, I'm sorry. And then some sort of representation in all offices and centers within 2 years so that we're ahead of an economy downturn, which we all know is going to happen. So, is that aggressive? It may be, but it's what we need, and we're going to have to flesh this out as we go by seeing where we need staff everywhere because unemployment exists everywhere. But what we don't know is in a certain part of the state, we may need somebody 5 days a week. In another part of the state, we may need somebody 2 days a week. So we're going to flesh that out. We're going to learn to communicate and post that with the satellite offices of when help will be there so that they will be informed. Now, also, we will be there and be present to help employers. We have done a major push in unemployment insurance, something that's kind of heard of. We don't wait for the employers to reach out to us. We are actually doing an employer outreach program, and we are reaching out to employers around the state to explain mass layoff options when they have a permanent layoff and employer-filed claims options when they have a temporary layoff that takes a lot of pressure off of the claimants. An example, a successful example of this employer outreach program is Dollywood and GM. Recently, we've been to their facilities twice in the last couple of years, helped a lot of people with their unemployment claims and alleviate their concerns. We've also had this experience with numerous smaller employers throughout the state. So we're extremely proud of where we're going. We want to be leaders in unemployment insurance, and to that means, I'm talking directly to you, I just got off my USDOL phone call, and this particular subject came up. And they said that they are actually wanting to encourage more states to do the footprint and put UI back out in the public. And so it's an opportunity where Tennessee could be a leader, which is, I know, what Commissioner McCord and Deputy Commissioner Thomas want us to be. So I think this is going to be a home run. Now, does anybody have any questions for me about the unemployment insurance program or our idea or anything? At all? You did last year.
All right, 2 quick questions. One, how many comprehensive centers are there across the state? 23. And then how many full centers? Like 54. Okay. And then my other question is the employer outreach program. I actually hear about this from businesses quite often.
Yes, ma'am.
When that gets put together, is there going to be some type of outreach that ECD could provide to the businesses to help them make this connection as well? Could it be packaged that way?
I don't have any problem with that. I think that would be a good idea. The more that we can do to get that out there, I think the better off we could be. It could help in a lot of ways. Probably too many to name right now in a lot of divisions. So I don't have any problem with us working with Denise to get any of those ideas out there and fleshed out at the same time. But the employer outreach, right now, if they don't need us to come to their facility, we have gone to Chambers of Commerce and met with several employers at once, put on a presentation and allowed them to ask questions. But we always tell them that we will put them a booklet in the mail that shows them how to register on our system, how to answer an unemployment claim, how to answer or file an appeal if they're unhappy with it, who to get in touch with to pay their quarterly taxes if they're a new business. So we've had a lot of positive feedback on that particular thing, but we could get better at it. It's sort of new too.
Yeah, I just think it'd be helpful for
Yeah.
I know a guy at Dollywood who has seen the impact of that. Was a very real problem, and the outreach has made all the difference in the world, and it's been tremendous. So I hope more businesses will take advantage of that, and I think that's definitely a step in the right direction. You say you're going to fund these, 70-something positions back out at the AJCs with attrition. I wouldn't think there's going to be that much attrition, to be able to reassign different folks. What other options do we have for funding on that?
I'm not that far ahead as far as
Okay.
the options, but the unemployment division is sort of a funny thing in that when we hire incoming claims agents, the only place, for the most part, the only place that the next level staff comes from is from that first level of claims operations, because in the other units, they have to have that knowledge to even be eligible for the job. So we do have a lot of attrition as far as those positions, and I happen to think, based on the numbers, that what we're going to gain by putting that position out in the field will be well worth giving it up in the claim center atmosphere. Now, but I'm open to any suggestions as how else I could fund it, Commissioner.
So I think it's important to recognize that the footprint's going to be there, but not as large as it used to be. And so that's not like we're abandoning the online, because that's going to be probably the bulk of everything. But we need to have a presence there to for customer service in the rural areas. And so as we lose a position in Nashville, we're going to have another position. That's where the position's going to go out. And you get a double whammy there because that job in a rural area is huge as well. And I think that the whole mindset we have here too is that Rusty's division is not a check issuing agency, it's an employment reentry agency. And so how do we, if we think about it that way, how do we best execute on that employment reentry agency while we're trying to get folks over? And so I think that mindset, but this is the first time I heard before the end of the year, so Rusty and I will talk a little bit after the thing, but I love it. I mean, I do, but it's not going to be an all or once. We have to be good stewards of the money that we have and spend it where we need to. But this is the strategy going forward, that we will have a footprint. And in some, they may be sharing several areas. I mean, it depends on what the data says, where we get the most claims and that sort of thing. But
That's a good point I left out as well. We're going to approach it from that
yeah,
standpoint.
and we might have connectivity issues in some areas, from internet-wise, and that will be where we go. And so it'll be well thought out strategy as we go.
And I will make one point to what you were saying and to the commissioner's point is when we used to do unemployment, and I'm one of a handful that's left in this division, where we used to do unemployment face-to-face, Tim, in the career centers, you very rarely ever had a claimant come in and say, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, or I don't know how to do this next step, because we explained it to them face-to-face, went through the process with them, and I think there's a lot to be said for educating somebody on the process up front. As we saw at Dollywood, we didn't have a lot of repeat tickets with people because we spent the time with them and showed them what was going to happen. So that's what we're hoping to gain too, is to, in more effectively offering that customer service up front, reduce our own numbers. So I think we can win in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that makes good sense. The efficiency can pay off. I like the aggressive timeline. It's the right move.
We can make it work. That's what
Yeah.
we're going to do.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Any other questions?
Building on your last comment, Rusty, I think, what are the metrics that you are going to use to gauge success? Because I think if you can show success of the hybrid model, then those funding conversations become easier, right, in thinking about next steps. So you mentioned a few things, reaching participants that we don't currently have a way to reach, reducing call volume or less, shrinking the number of tickets. How are you thinking about measuring success in this first phase?
Well, that's a good question. Because of our Zendesk ticketing system, we can see when a customer calls and for what, first of all. We can also measure if they're a repeat caller every week. That lack of education on how to certify can create somebody to leave a ticket every week. I can't do this. I still can't do this. So we can measure it in that way. And the other thing is I think we can measure it by, well, I forgot my point. And it was a really good one, too. Something you said, I wanted to make this point, and I can't remember it. There was another way that we have talked about measuring success with this program. No, I can't remember, and I apologize. But we have already talked about that because to Commissioner McCord's, one of the first things he said to me was, we have to be able to measure what we call operational excellence. So that's one of the first things we started thinking about is we've got to be able to prove that putting somebody back out there, this UI footprint, that we can show that it works. And we have left a lot of people behind, and at the same time we modernized our system, we took something very popular away in the state of Tennessee that was called employer filed claims. And for years, you had people that had worked in manufacturing plants all over Tennessee that on a regular basis laid their plant off in December and in January, and they filed their unemployment claim, and you had claimants that never touched it. They just got their waiting period served, and then they got a check or two, and then they were right back to work. Well, at the same time we modernized, we took that option away, and we hurt both employers and claimants with that. We hurt ourselves with that too, because it created a lot of confusion and a lot of extra tickets for us. So we're trying to implement some of these good ideas, but use our technology to our advantage. So we are going to be gauging our success and everything, because he made that clear from the beginning. We've got to be able to prove that what we're doing is working.
So Rusty, I'm going to throw you an assist. So one way to measure Rusty's success, obviously, is going to be an uptick in dislocated worker services and employment, because to Commissioner's point, Rusty brings folks who need to go back to work to the American Job Centers. Every person who's receiving unemployment is a dislocated worker. And so as those dislocated worker numbers increase and their entered employment increase, that's really a joint assist between Rusty and I. And so that's one metric that we'll continue to monitor. And although he was too gracious to say it, we talked earlier about the funding allocation. The methodology is a little antiquated on the workforce side. It is on Rusty's side as well. And that resource justification model is old. And unfortunately, people think when the unemployment rates are down, you don't need to throw any money to unemployment insurance, when really states that are trying to be proactive, as Rusty is, to prepare for the downturn, you need your funding. And right now, it's not on anyone's mind. They react once the unemployment rates tend to go back up. Well, it's really left him in an operational pickle by not having the resources. And so that's one of the things that, if this board so chooses, it's great to have that opinion from a board to say to the folks at USDOL that we need to reconsider the resource justification model so that we can prepare better as a state, so we don't wait until the bottom falls out and figure out how we're going to serve all these people. So I just wanted to, you can thank me later, Rusty.
That's what I was going to say. It was not going to sound like that. It never does, and I was sure I wasn't going to have to follow Denise today, and I did. But thank you for the assist, because the point I was going to make is, right now, all the indicators show that while it may fluctuate a tad, the unemployment rate is 3.2, 3.3, something we never thought we'd see again. But I don't look for that to change very much. Well, I know right now, I don't think that you will reduce the number of claims filings if the unemployment rate stays the same, but we will have a very real way to measure if we're a year from now and the unemployment rate is at 3.3. That'll give us a clear indicator with the number of tickets and repeat customers' requests for help and everything. So all the indicators say that we're okay for right now. But one thing that, I'm not going to give Commissioner McCord credit for this, because this is something that we've talked about in our leadership and he fully supports, is state government has always been judged as being reactionary. Why do we have to stand and wait for us to be punched in the mouth? You know, why don't we come out swinging first with good ideas? And then Commissioner McCord says we're going to be leaders. So he's supportive of anything like that we come up with. So I think we got something really to be excited about. Unemployment's never a thing to be excited about, but we need to help those people. Any other?
And the unemployment rate is something to be excited about, so.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Any other questions? Rusty, thank you.
Thank you.
Great work.
Thank you all for having me.
Okay, let's hear from Assistant Commissioner Casey Hogner-Wren about education.
Sure, thank you. It's good to be able to have a few minutes to talk to this group who deeply understands the workforce system and the Workforce Innovation Act, and thinking about how it can connect with our secondary students. So we've already talked a little bit about high school already today, and thinking through how are we preparing students to join that system of workforce and build pipelines for our employers, not just that are currently here, but as economic community development as well. And so we're spending a little bit of time just today to make some of the connections between Perkins, which is the federal fund that support career and technical education programs in both secondary and post-secondary, and how that we can work together with this workforce board and local workforce boards in the development of that. So last July, in a beautiful bipartisan effort in Washington, the Strengthening Career and Technical Education Act for the 21st Century, affectionately referred to as Perkins 5, was signed into law. We have had a lead up to that law going into effect, which is coming. That law will go into effect this July. And so the exact same planning timeline that you have already heard Deputy Commissioner Thomas talk about for WIOA and the 4-year plan that is due next year for that act, we are on a similar timeline now for Perkins, which was a very intentional choice by the federal government to say we want these two acts to work more in coordination and alignment, and part of that is planning, right? Because if you are planning to do things at different rates and different times, we know you're not talking to each other at the exact same time about the same projects, and so that was very intentional. This is the 5th reiteration of federal funding for career and technical education, and the bulk of the law has stayed intact, meaning the way that funds are formula distributed to local school districts is similar. The types of programs that we want to support are similar, but there have been some very important changes that I want to call attention to. One is there is now an expectation that local agencies, local school districts who want to obtain these funds, rather than just doing a local plan each year and submitting to the Department of Education, they're now required to do a comprehensive local needs assessment and then submit an application for those funds based on that needs assessment. And I think what's really important here is that needs assessment is including not just where their programs currently are and the progress of their current students, any gaps that they may have in serving those students, but it also includes an alignment question. Are the career and technical education programs you are selecting for your schools, is there a justification for those subject areas in your local and regional context in terms of labor and workforce needs? And while we have been having those conversations with local school districts and building that capacity for several years, it has never been a requirement to have that data actually show in order to earn these funds. And so I think the state of Tennessee and our collaboration between the Department of Education, Department of Labor, Economic and Community Development, we have been moving in this direction for several years, but actually putting the teeth in those applications for local districts through the needs assessment is really important. There are also some other key provisions in the law that make more explicit connections to both our general education expectations and Higher Education Act, but also to WIOA in terms of the definitions that we're using, the stakeholders we are required to consult with, including you all, and thinking about what this looks like on the ground as we are doing our 4-year plan. So in terms of timeline, right now we are looking at we are about to submit a transition plan that will serve our first year, and so the law goes into effect July 1st. That first year of the law leading into July 2020, we are in a transition year. So there are very different data collection and reporting requirements in the new law. We are working to update our data systems for those. There's also changes in set-asides and financials in terms of thinking about recruiting special populations into our career and technical education programs, and an increase in our ability to serve students who are in state institutions. And so again, there's several overlaps with folks who are represented on this board. And so we are submitting that transition plan at the end of the month that will guide our work to transition to the full implementation of our 4-year state plan, which will line up to the next next iteration of the WIOSD plan next July. And so if you scroll down a little bit, this is what that transition will look like. That development of a four-year state plan, there is very explicit requirements in the law for the consultation. No more will the Department of Ed just be creating this on our own, but we will be working in coordination with other agencies, with local school and district leaders, with family and students, community organizations, and our local workforce boards. And I think if you've heard questions that I've asked of other plans for local boards, you'll see that we are working very intentionally in connecting some of the capacity building resources through the Tennessee Board of Regents or the Tennessee Department of Education with our local boards. And this is a place where we can drive some of that consultation at both the state and local levels. We are currently crunching numbers to look at how some of the changes in the law in terms of new disaggregation requirements for data and new definition of CTE concentrators, which are the students participating in multiple courses in career and technical education, how those changes of definitions in the law will actually impact what we think where we should set our performance targets. And so right now, we are currently looking at pulling some of those baseline data, and we will start a process in just about a month as we kick off the summer, traveling around the state, sharing the data that we have so far, talking about the new opportunities for innovation in the planning process to comply with this new law, and then asking for feedback on where do we think these goals should be set? What do we want career and technical education to look like in our high schools and in our post-secondary institutions in the state? And how can we use this law and this funding source as a source of innovation and improvement, and not just sustaining the status quo? I think the objectives of this law align incredibly closely with Governor Lee's priorities in this space, and I think our ability to use for example, a focus on rural or a focus on disadvantaged populations is going to be able to mean that we can use funds to really set clear expectations at the state level for what the governor expects our programs to be able to accomplish, how he wants to support our programs with more flexible funding, and then how we are planning in coordination with the WIOA planning timeline as well. And so we will be doing that over the next year, and we will submit our final four-year state plan that will include Perkins next spring. So next April or May, and that four-year plan will kick off and be in effect starting July 2020. So I'm happy to take any questions about what the next 12 months look like for us, or about career and technical education in the state.
So I have a question. You mentioned the needs assessment, and so when I think about assessing the needs in an area, it's really specific to the workforce needs. So is this needs assessment going to be required to be in overlap with the local workforce agency and the school system?
So that's a great question, and I think that those types of overlaps and collaborations are only going to strengthen what's actually happening on the ground and how we're serving students, because we know that the people are in these communities aren't one thing during part of the day and a completely different thing on the weekends or when they graduate, right? They are the same folks that are in the system, in this community. And so I think enhancing the collaboration between a local workforce board and the local districts that are served in that area is a big part of one of our goals here. I think there's some expectations that we need to set for us from the state level in terms of what do we expect the questions that we're asking of that needs assessment. How much data can we deliver, right? We collect an enormous amount of data from the state, and actually one of the new provisions in the reauthorized law is the ability of education agencies to actually be a client of workforce and the data that you all collect. And so we have to make those connections stronger at the local level by providing that data, asking the same questions, and ensuring folks know who to contact to make sure that those planning cycles are combined.
Right. So not taken away at all from the knowledge of those individuals running the individual school boards at all, but I think that sometimes, we talked about economic downturn a lot already today, right? And so having that foresight at the state level to know what the indicators are and being able to share that with them, whether it's through the workforce agency or directly, I think that you're on the right path, that they also need to be customers of, you know, of the workforce system and the education system from the standpoint of sharing the data. Because the worst thing you can do is train someone for a career that's going away.
That's going away. Absolutely. I completely agree 100%. And I think what we need to recognize is the funds that we are using in this law should not be to sustain, you know, programs that have just been ongoing, but to think about how are we transitioning, how are we modernizing, how are we creating new programs based on the projected need of this community? How are we seeing our school districts for what they are, which is the economic engines, right, of communities, and how are we making sure that they're able to be proactive in planning for those futures? So I completely agree.
Casey, what role will this board have in reviewing or approving those plans?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think, one, we expect there to be consultation and coordination predominantly at the local level, right? So local workforce boards need to be we need to hear from them. So your comments about what is happening in a community and the data that local workforce boards have on hand, we want them to be participating in our consultation roundtables, the public open requests that we are going to be having throughout the summer. And this board, we will ask the same of. So there will be public comment periods, 2 large public comment periods, one this summer that will focus predominantly on the performance indicators, our quality performance indicators, and then the targets that we will be setting for those. We no longer have to enter into a negotiation with the federal government in the new law. We as a state need to come together and define what success looks like for us. And so at our next workforce board meeting, I can definitely give an update on what comments do we need on those performance indicators. There will be a second open public comment period about the bulk of the programming decisions in the plan. That will be later in the fall. And so again, we can have those conversations and get open public comment from this body as well. And then we will be working closely together. I know that the governor plays a larger role in the new law in terms of approving the plan. And you know, Denise and I are already working closely in terms of how are we combining our planning efforts for WIOA and Perkins, and then what does that look like heading into approval next year. And so I expect that there to be more specific action items and next steps for this body as those planning things get hashed out.
I have a question. First of all, I think this is wonderful. We all know that greater CTE education is absolutely necessary for the future. My question is there going to be a way to ensure that we have the right people educating the students in these programs? I think many times, I don't think this is correct, but many times CTE students and/or CTE's teachers are seen as lower level than the rest of education world. I think my experience has been we need to change that, because a lot of the jobs are requiring more skill and a higher level of skill than I think we all that currently being provided. So is there going to be a way to ensure that we are getting the right teachers that have not only the skills currently, but also are able to develop the skills for the future skill set that's going to be needed to teach the young people, to keep them engaged, and so forth. So that's something I think what we need to make sure that we're considering is the teacher can have a great impact on a student being able to continue on.
Absolutely.
And I think we need to especially emphasize that in the CTE programs.
Yeah, Absolutely. So before I answer your specific question, I do want to share some news with this body in terms of your comments around the perception of historical vocational education in high school and how that is often seen as a separate track to college or to post-secondary or a less than track. In Tennessee, as we transitioned to the Tennessee Diploma Project back in 2009, 2010, one of the things we did was pull those tracks together, right? And say we have one high school diploma in the state of Tennessee. No longer are we having these separate tracks that have actually different expectations for our students. And through that and after that, the raising of our general education standards, and we have done a full reform of our career and technical education programs and standards since then. That started back in 2012. And that multi-year reform effort has done a few things. One, it has retired courses and programs that we knew no longer had a labor market demand, but also were low rigor. And when we looked at our data, we saw that students weren't performing at the same level as their peers in certain career clusters and programs of study. And so we have taken the steps to retire programs that we did not think were rigorous or meeting the demands of the future workforce, in which a majority of our students are going to need some sort of training post-high school. Right? And so that reform effort has actually led to increases in the rate of our students who concentrate in CTE going on to post-secondary, the rate of them taking early post-secondary courses in high school. And when back in 2012, there was about a 9 or 10 percentage point gap between our students who were concentrating in CTE that went on to college and those who weren't. As of this past graduating cohort, that gap is now closed. And so the increase of students in our career and technical education programs, the increase of the rigor of those programs, the expectation that CTE is leading to some sort of post-secondary training, that has been a decade-long effort to try and quell that old perception of vocational education, and that we do see paying off. That has set us up for the even higher expectations in Perkins 5 that says we're actually going to measure your success based on the students who are completing a post-secondary credential, students who are earning post-secondary courses in high school, and students who are earning industry certifications and participating in work-based learning, which is a higher bar than the technical skill attainment that was set in the previous law. So I think Tennessee is really well set up for this. But one of what you pointed out on the educators is incredibly important. And so there is an expectation in the law that a portion of our leadership funds are used for recruitment, retention, and development of educators. We're actually working on pilot programs right now to develop district-led and community college-led teacher preparation programs specifically for CTE educators to take folks who already have the technical content knowledge and give them the teaching pedagogy knowledge to be able to put them in the classroom. So that way we're not requiring folks to take several years to do this, but we're able to do this in a way that we know it's quality and that gets the right folks in front of students the quickest. So we're working on those pilot programs right now. There is additional information in our law. And frankly, that's what we want to hear from our locals too in this year-long planning process is what do you need? What barriers do you currently have to licensure and certification? What barriers do we currently have to recruitment and retention of folks into these roles? And we hope we can address some of those barriers that we're hearing in the planning process.
Any other questions? Excellent. Thank you for the great report. I think I'm going to move the agenda around just a little bit and allow people to take a biological break if they want. And then when we come back, we'll hear the plan presentations from the various regions and local boards. So take 10 minutes. Let's try to be back at 11:30, and we'll go from there. discussion. If you would, wrap up your good conversations and fellowship, and we'll get back to work.
And that's fair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. So if you'll remember from our last board meeting, we cited the reasons that we were postponing a few of these presentations. So thank you for understanding the accountability there and making sure that this board is doing its job to hold those regions and boards accountable. So thank you for allowing us to do it that way. And first, we're going to hear from Greater Memphis, so please welcome Daryl Causey and Kyla Guyette.
You guys don't have to clap. So good morning, everybody. Thanks for having us here. We apologize that Greater Memphis is delayed, but we are finally here to present. And I just want to introduce myself again. My name is Kyla Guyette. I am the Executive Director of Greater Memphis, and Daryl Causey, our Regional Director. I thought we were somehow. Okay, so really for us, we want to focus again and refocus Greater Memphis on what it is that we do. So our vision is to have a world-class workforce system that enables our businesses to be leaders throughout the global economy. We aren't just thinking regionally and within the state, we are really thinking on a global scale. So our mission is simple, connecting employers with talent. Isn't that what we do every day? Greater Memphis provides innovative services that exceed employers' requirements for the jobs of today and of the future, because preparing for the future is just as important as meeting the jobs every day.
As you can see, Greater Memphis is Tennessee's economic engine. Greater Memphis represents 16% of the Tennessee's total population. Shelby County itself ranks #1 in Tennessee's both retail sales, with more than double of the largest Lakes County, Davidson County. Most women in minority-owned businesses by more than double of any county, and 22.6% of the, that's just from 2018, Tennessee receipts and recipients, healthcare, manufacturing, wholesale, and hospitality directly coming from Shelby County.
So how does Greater Memphis facilitate access through our one-stop system? So first, we have a competitively procured OSO, just like everyone else does, to really check the overall health of our workforce development system. We have 3 comprehensive AJCs and 3 affiliate AJCs. So we also have staff traveling throughout the region to provide on-site services in locations that are convenient to customer groups. So where do our customers, or the customers that we would like to have, our potential customers, most frequent? So we're having mobile services go out to those locations for them. We already have a pilot going on at MISCOR, so that's Memphis Shelby County Corrections, and Agape. So we have in those 2 locations AJC team members that are on site there providing our services directly for their individuals. We also have a strong partner network, so really it's about our partners. And we would love to be the be-all, end-all for all things workforce development, but we can't be. So we have a really strong partnership throughout the region, and really it's really about the wraparound supports. That's the piece that we utilize our partners most for. What I am looking to do in the next few months, and this is really one of the goals that I have, is the establishment of AJC access points throughout the service area. So based on known successful models that are going on around the country, we would like to establish a minimum of 25 additional access points throughout the community. So That could be anywhere. We talked about the Urban League of Memphis. We have individuals that are going there seeking services. Workforce is a vital need of most of those customers, so why do we not have AJC representation in those centers? So we're looking for 25. I know some locations that go up to 100, so we will be growing from there, from 25. Additionally, we would like the development of a WIOA online pre-app that happens through our website and a video orientation to services. So there really is the trend throughout the country to get more technology-based, more mobile. Let's do WIOA services on our phone. Every young person, an adult has an iPhone or some other smart device at this point. So we would like to provide as much of that upfront information as possible right there on their smartphone. We'd also like the ability to be able to schedule them for appointments through the mobile application. Additionally, we are looking at some software with the state in order to do some AI technology. That's something I would love to be able to incorporate down the line. Denise and I have already talked about it in the past, but really, how do we make services more accessible, especially in our rural communities, without having to come into the four walls of a brick and mortar AJC? So let's talk about our priority populations. So veterans, low-income veterans, the spouses of veterans, we always are having them as our highest priority population. So we have lots of partnerships. So there is a VA hospital in Memphis. We also have the Office of Veterans Services through the county. Through several of our counties, they have their own Office of Veterans Services. There also is some veterans groups, some transition groups that are working throughout our service region that we use as a referral relationship. Something a little different that we're looking to incorporate in the next year, we want to be more proactive. So we have lots of businesses that say, I have jobs at $17 an hour, but I have no one here qualified to fill those jobs. We have military individuals, military families that are transitioning out of the service in our region, and we'd like to be able to put a package together with that employer to go on to bases and say, for those that are transitioning, if you would like to relocate to Memphis, here's what we can offer you. We can offer you $17 an hour, we can offer you these benefits, and this transitional stipend. That's something the military actually supports, and it happens a lot of other places in the country. It's just very underutilized. So we'd like to start doing that in Memphis as well. Low-income and public assistance recipients. So we are in a constant evolution, really, with our TANF partners on trying to make this as easy as possible to either co-enroll or refer back and forth customers. I think it's something that needs a lot of work, but it's something that we are dedicated to really streamlining that process and not having two independent dual systems operating probably about 2 miles from each other, really is where that happens. So while we have an AJC doing full comprehensive services, 2 miles down the road, they have a center that's doing almost the same thing. And how do we best utilize funds to combine those efforts? And so that's something that we are constantly working to improve that system with DHS, but it's something that we absolutely are committed to doing. Additionally, right now, our agency, WIN, is under the Department of Shelby County's Community Services. So as you would think, community service also touches a lot of individuals that meet these low-income criteria. So we are also looking to map some of those services. So through their agency, where are customers most utilizing their services? And then put a map of where customers are using our services. How do we best integrate that to make sure that we are best serving those customers as a wraparound support? Dislocated workers. So we have coordinated rapid response activities with all of our stakeholders. Our Chamber of Commerce for Greater Memphis is very heavily involved in this as well from the employer's perspective, from the employer side, and we swing on in there and really help with the rapid response events from the customer side. And it's a continuous effort that we have to how do we best streamline this process to make it easier for employees to know about their services, one, to access their services as soon as they have those letters, the layoff letters, and how do we work with employers to allow that transition period to happen? Because we have a lot of employers that are on the fence about even allowing their staff to engage in services while they are still waiting for that layoff period. So we're continuously working on that. So two of my passion projects, let's see, they have a lot of words in those boxes, are reentry and opportunity youth. So for reentry, our mayor, our Cleo, Mayor Harris, has really put a laser focus on reentry for us locally. And I know as on the state level, so has the governor. So right now, we have services that are happening 2 days a week out of the Memphis Shelby County Office of Corrections. So anybody that is reentry, at any point of reentry, no matter if they just got out yesterday or 17 years ago, they can be served at the Office of Reentry. They have programming there that supports those efforts, but we are having 2 days a week somebody from our services really come and intensify around ITAs, training, what can we provide at the American Job Center? Because we found going into an actual AJC has been a barrier for a lot of different reasons for some of these individuals. We are also looking to start working with the Department of Corrections. They are very excited to help us out, having services behind the walls of corrections. So that's really where we are going in that direction. So work release customers and those that are within 60 days of release, having to work on soft skills piece, and then some degree of OJT prior to work release, and then hopefully having a job upon release. So it's really about reducing recidivism for our area. So it is our intention to really staff that with AJC staff members in order to best serve those customers, because the Department of Corrections and our staff both have very different goals as far as and guidelines about what we are able to do, but together it's really a great wraparound support program. Opportunity Youth. So unfortunately, our area has been identified as having over 30,000 opportunity youth. So that's more population than a lot of workforce regions even have. So we've got to do a much better job at reaching our opportunity youth. And so I have a procurement going out right now, and that's really what we're looking to do is step up those providers. And one thing I'm going to say is not only are we planning to meet state measures, their goal is going to be 5% above state measures. And that's what we're demanding from our youth providers. So sector strategies, I just listed some of our data contributors. I won't go through them.
So transportation and logistics in our area, it's right here by the numbers, as you can see. 87,600 people are employed by transportation and logistics field regionally. 5 are served by, the number 5 there, served by 5 class, 1 rail systems, and one of only 4 cities. This is one of only 4 cities here in the area. The 4 R's. The greater Memphis region is uniquely connected to the logistics by the 4, rail, runway, road, and river. And as you can see, number 1 in this area, busiest cargo airport in the U.S., number 2 in the world, $33,860 is the average wage rate of all transportation jobs in the region. That big number at the bottom, as you can see, 187,600,000. Number of people that can be reached in the 162 metro markets via overnight truck. It's huge.
So I'll just talk about this very briefly. We have some partnerships that are going on around some of these sectors. So the Greater Memphis Chamber of Commerce has developed some sector councils, and through those councils, we are a part to be able to go and really have the businesses drive those conversations. We are sitting in the passenger seat with our notes, furiously taking notes as to what those businesses are saying are their challenges, what are their needs, and then later we connect together and really drive that forward and say, as a group, collectively in workforce development, what can we do to solve those needs?
More stats. Manufacturing and healthcare. This happens a lot in our area, in our region. 44,000. Number of people are regionally employed in manufacturing. Number 2 is we're the second busiest medical device manufacturing location in the nation. $34,180 is the average wage for regional manufacturing jobs. Number 7 hospital systems among the 25 largest employers in the region, combined with 34,591 employees. $63,075 is the median wage for healthcare sector and employment. Can I get a raise? I'm just sorry. 15% of the employment in the region in the healthcare is in healthcare for the social assistance sector, which is the largest in the region.
Okay, so partnerships. We have Hope to Hire. I will be very brief about Hope to Hire. So it's operated by Hope Works with one of our corrections facility. So we're delivering training behind the wall of that facility, and then along with TCAT. And then through Wagner Pizer funding, they are getting those basic core services while they're still behind the wall. And then we are connecting them outside to community partnerships to make sure that we have some wraparound support for when they are released. So the idea is to get them immediately connected to a work experience for an OJT upon release. We have a partnership with GMAC directly around the medical device industry. So we are the second largest location for medical device manufacturing. So we are trying to get non-traditionally, individuals that are not traditionally in that field connected to that medical device field. Agape is a really cool partnership. Agape means love, and they are within our school system. So we have navigators, career navigators, and family navigators that are actually in the school systems and working on a two-family approach around helping those individuals connect to all the services, housing, jobs, everything they should need. Again, I won't touch again on Division of Community Services, but we are working together to make sure all of that partnership, all of our services that do overlap are really able to best serve our community. And BioWorks is about getting people that are not traditionally in the field into technology-based fields. So board members, I have very little time left, so I'll just tell you, Greater Memphis is going through a revitalization, and we are starting with Vision 2025. And that's a back to the drawing board to really get everyone in the community on the same page. That is whether it's transportation, it is the school systems, it's all of our nonprofits, it's our public sector. Everybody come into the room, leave the egos at the door, and let's talk about really what the vision for Greater Memphis is going to be. And so that's going to be a year-long process. Do you have questions?
Yeah, go ahead and finish up your thought. Yeah.
Okay, so really that's what this is about. It's about taking the best practices from around the nation. What is everybody doing that's working really well? Having a strategic planning organization come in and really lead our board through that. It's board redevelopment. Do we have the right individuals on our board? Are they engaged? Because as you guys know, an engaged board is really the vital part of getting this work going. So we're going to do all of that. We're holding stakeholder meetings throughout the community. That is everyone from town halls with job seekers to our partner stakeholders in education, corrections. Anyone who has any fingerprint on workforce and economic development, we want them in the room. We want to have those conversations to have a really unified and strategic vision for our region. And out of that, we're hoping to do a 5-year plan. And there's a bunch more slides, but that's, you can ask any questions.
Fine. Thank you. Obviously, aggressive plan. It sounds like you have
Yes.
some good initiatives. Any questions about any of those initiatives?
So I know that when I attended the last meeting, you were not part of the team. And so I think it's important for this board to understand how the time span in which this was put together.
Yeah, so I came on board, March 6th was my first day. So I'm still just right at 2 months. But I do bring to Greater Memphis over a decade of experience directly in workforce development and working entire states across the country. So for me, it's really the opportunity to come in and bring Greater Memphis to where it has the potential to be, because there is nothing but potential in that region, and we have the ability to be the leading workforce board in the state, and it's my job and my responsibility to help get there in a very short amount of time. So we've done this kind of vision planning in the last 2 months, and I'm aggressive about it, to be done through the end of the year to really get us back on track.
Questions, you talked about your Opportunity Youth, and obviously
Yes.
you have a huge population there, and from the education perspective, where we know we need to work very closely
Yes.
together. It looks like you guys are electing to use the waiver, so you can catch those students earlier. Talk about, so you mentioned Agape. Are there other partners that you're using, or what do those services look like for in-school and out-of-school youth?
Okay, so we are in the middle right now. It is out for bid for both in-school and out-of-school services, because I will say, if there is one particular area of workforce development that I am passionate about, I could probably talk for 3 days straight on Opportunity Youth, because that is what my expertise nationally is actually in, educating boards on how to best serve young adults. And so our youth operations are going to be taking a change from top to bottom. We really have got to do a much better job. So it is going to be a whole host of different providers, start July 1. I have no doubt in that. But we have a really prescribed way that is successful around the country, and that's more intensive services. A lot of people have the impression that when they're dropout kids, as people like to term them, we have to do less services. So because they've dropped out of school, why would they want to come and sit in a classroom? It's actually quite the opposite. So the more we expect and the more we demand and the more structure we put into place, our enrollment rates, our retention rates, and our outcome rates actually go through the roof. This has been proven out time and time again in some operations that I've done around the country, but really that's the model. We are focusing on CTE students, particularly with our in-school funds, and then our alternative schools, Carver High School particularly is going to be using some of those funds, and then out of school, it is very intensive services models. And happily, by the next board meeting, I'll be able to tell you who those providers are. We'll have selected them by then.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. I mean, 30,000
Yes.
is a huge number, and,
Yes.
and the thing about that is you know, outside of the greater Memphis area, there's a huge need for people as well if they have these skills. So I hope that when you are looking at this, these service providers, that you're making sure that they're providing not only the technical skills that are necessary, but also focusing on those employability skills, because that's one thing that a lot of employers struggle with, is having people with those employability skills as well. So.
And I will say, from my past experience, I developed a 75-point competency chart. And those are competencies, things like, can I tie a tie if I'm a young man? Do I know how to register to vote? It's really life lesson-based competencies. Can I talk in front of a group? Those kind of things. And so we incorporate those 75 competencies. Not only do you have to be taught those, you have to master them before you're able to complete the class. So I'm looking to incorporate some of those types of activities into our young adult programs to really be evidence-based and outcome-based.
Very good. Any other questions? All right, well, Kyla and Daryl, thank you for the a very comprehensive report, and definitely some aggressive plans that you have, but they all look very solid, and it sounds like you've got the right path moving forward.
Yes, I appreciate that.
All right, what we'll do is we'll hear all the presentations, and then as a board, we'll approve each one.
Chairman, are we allowed to clap?
Oh, absolutely. All right, let's hear from Southern Middle, Selena Moore and Wendy Jones.
I'm going to figure out how this works before we get started. Okay, good deal. Good morning, and thank you, Commissioner and new Deputy Commissioner Thomas and board members, for letting us present. My name is Selena Moore, and I'm the Regional Director for Southern Middle Tennessee. And this is my new interim director. You have probably seen her around. Our executive director retired on April 5th, so from the last board meeting till now, this is Wendy Jones, and she is our interim executive director for Southern Middle Tennessee.
I'm sorry, Selena. For our live stream friends, can you use the mic, please?
I'm a little short. You can have that one. This is Wendy Jones. She is the new interim director. This will go through our next local board meeting. For the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and roll right into our presentation. Southern Middle Tennessee touches Alabama. We are the 13th southernmost counties of Tennessee. We have 3 comprehensive centers. Those are located in Coffee County, Lawrence County, and Murray County. We do not actually have any affiliate sites. We decided to do 6 specialized centers. That way we could target special targeted populations in those areas. We have 1 in Bedford County, Giles County, Franklin, Lewis, Lincoln, and Marshall County. And you'll see at the bottom we have a phase 2. You'll see Perry County there. That is our known distress county. We've already started the phase 2. We have access points in Hickman, Perry, and Wayne. We're in the process of putting a specialized center in each of those counties. Perry County will be the first one that we put a new center in there.
Okay. Jobs for 10 can be accessed at any local American Job Center and also be utilized from home. The board utilizes participant data that is gathered from Jobs for TN for the purpose of reporting and strategic planning. Rural area access points are used for participant meetings, libraries.
Sorry, we're still training.
Libraries or home computers allow participants outside close proximity to specialized or comprehensive centers to still have electronic availability to counseling, assessments, job search, resumes, electronic job applications. And one of the largest barriers for our rural areas is lack of internet. The mobile coach also shares data of participant services that are input into Jobs for TN for data tracking and resource placement. Thank you. I'm sorry.
If it's going to happen, it's going to be us. So
Yes.
we'll just roll with it.
The mobile career coach also shares data of participant services that are input into Jobs for TN for data tracking, resource placement. These are tracked on a quarterly dashboard report, and events covered include rapid response, unemployment claims, career fairs, hiring events, and high school and post-secondary recruitment events. The mobile career coach can accommodate up to 10 participants at one time for the services. And I would start all over, but we don't have time.
During the local plan and the regional plan, we kind of looked at our strategies, and so I've kind of listed some of those. And Casey, I really thought about you when I was going through and putting this presentation together. In Southern Middle, we already have really good relationships with a lot of our partners, so we're going to enhance those. So we're going to enhance our reentry service providers. We've been working better with our probation and parole offices, our local employers, faith-based and community-based organizations, our vocational and post-secondary institutes. And these are our top populations in and out of school youth, our veterans, low-income individuals, individuals with disabilities, youth aged out of the foster care system, our single and teen parents, those that are long-term unemployed, and those that are justice involved or in recovery court. And I've put 2 bullets. We have many reentry programs, but I've listed 2 there. Ms. Christine Hopkins, who's not here today, is in Southern Middle, and we do the Middle Tennessee Rural Reentry Program in Franklin County with her. And then we have Murray County Reentry Program. And with that program, with Sheriff Rowland, there is going to be an opportunity, hopefully at the end of June, for more grant money to kind of expand that into Lawrence, Wayne, and Giles County. And we already have smaller reentry services there, but we're looking to expand those to take in the mental health piece and the counseling piece that we're missing. Some of our outreach methods for those populations include social media postings, hiring and job events. We have a menu of services that we keep in the local American Job Centers. We also do newspaper and radio listings. We do high school recruitment events, and then also our mobile career coach events. And this is where I thought of you, Casey. Some of our post-secondary training at the local TCATs and post-secondary institutes include automotive technology, administrative office technology. We're big into the CAD. Computer technology, we have dental assisting, HVAC, our high-set testing, industrial electricity, industrial maintenance, big LPN population, surgical technology, and truck driving and welding. We have some work-based learning students. We have 17 over at Tullahoma High School, and they run those through their special education department. And some of the jobs that they're training in is cabinet making, automotive, animal hospital care, car detailing, local government. They're working with the Department of the board, like the county boards for school maintenance and the local Head Starts. We have also talked with Fayetteville High School, and they will begin doing the same thing in the fall, doing a work-based learning program with their special education department. And then we're also working with Tracy Whitehead, our CTE Regional Pathways Coordinator, and she's awesome. She comes to our local board meetings, and this is the data that she sent me as of Monday afternoon. We had 28 high schools that applied for the Tennessee Pathways certification. Out of those 28 high schools, we had 97 Tennessee Pathways applications, and then out of those 97, 36 different programs of study were represented. And so I just kind of listed the top ones that were in demand mostly for our area. And I was like the agriculture, engineer, anything agriculture, because we're very rural. So we were excited to see those on there. Construction, business management, even cybersecurity, because in Upper Cumberland, they do a lot with cybersecurity also, and we border Upper Cumberland as well. Industrial maintenance, machine tool technology, and mechatronics is big in Southern Middle. Therapeutic services and welding.
Our employment engagement strategy, our business service teams who represent AJC Partners programs, which provides access to resume assistance, workshops, career counseling, hosting job fair events, and Tennessee Reconnect. Business engagement is led by the business services team and will continue to build relationships with local partners that include Tennessee Pathways Coordinator, Chamber of Commerce, industrial boards, and local and regional economic and community development partners. We'll continue to work with the ECD Base Camp to utilize resources that are already established within the more rural communities to ensure that our job seekers across Southern Middle Tennessee are positioned to meet local employer needs. Funding such as incumbent worker, on-the-job training, and consolidated business grants continue to be of great importance to employers. The effectiveness of our employer engagement strategy will be measured by reviewing the monthly unemployment data, local employer feedback surveys, number of work opportunity tax credits, and on-the-job training contracts.
We're doing more and more to engage our local board members and our local officials. One of the things that we have done is we are in the process of creating a new board website for our local board. We do emails, phone calls. We have monthly business meetings with county mayors to discuss the local employers and their employee needs. We have an executive committee to the board that provides supervision and assists with the affairs of the board, and they assist with WIOA program oversight, our labor market analysis, and strategic planning. We also have an operations committee, and they provide information and assist with the American Job Center operations and any other issues relating to the one-stop delivery system. And what I've done is I've listed, we're just going to touch on 2 or 3 of our non-WIOA programs and services. In Southern Middle Tennessee, our board entity is South Central Tennessee Development District, and they house what we call SCATS. It's the South Central Area Transportation System, and they partner with TDOC on a contractual basis that provides transportation for all 13 counties for those that are justice involved. 5 minutes, okay. And then what they do is they take them, if they have job interviews, if they already have a job, they take them to that location. If they need, substance abuse treatment, they take them to those meetings. If they're attending adult ed courses or post-secondary, they take them to classes. And under certain circumstances, if they have medical appointments or regularly scheduled medical treatment, they will take those prior incarcerated to those appointments. But we work that out with TDOC. Over in Franklin County, they're in the process of building a 20,000 square foot TCAP Franklin County facility. And so they've used a community development block grant and local funds to build that. And that's going to house 6 of our high in-demand training options. Industrial maintenance, machine tool technology, welding technology, computer information technology, LPN, and certified nursing assistant. All of these TCATs are needed in that area to support the workforce demands of Franklin County as well as the neighboring counties. This targeted area will serve over 35,000 people, which 56.5% are low to moderately low income levels.
South Central Tennessee Development District will continue in the development and implementation of labor and education alignment programs, LEAP 1.0 and 2.0 through the THEC. LEAP 1.0 was for Bedford, Marshall, Lincoln, and Franklin, and 2.0 was Lawrence, Lewis, Murray, Perry, and Wayne. The goal is to eliminate the skill gaps in counties throughout the state by encouraging collaboration between education and industry by utilizing regional workforce data. LEAP 1.0 and 2.0 has provided industrial maintenance training courses in cooperation with the local TCAT institutions. Training courses will address training needs as expressed by local industries in order to provide educational and training programs that meet the local skill gaps, such as Perry County, which is categorized as a distressed county. LEAP projects will continue, will directly impact the Drive to 55 program and Governor Lee's GIVE initiative by encouraging post-secondary education.
And we'll be glad to take any questions that you have.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Yes, please.
The TCAT that you referenced, is that the Higher Education Center? Is it being called a TCAT, or are those
That's
two different
different.
things?
We have two. I didn't put the Lawrence County, there's a higher education center going in Lawrence County that will have 5 different higher ed divisions located in there. It will have Middle Tennessee State University, Tennessee Tech University, TCAT Pulaski, Martin Methodist, and I'm leaving one out. I lost. It's in Lawrence County. Due to weather, it is running behind this spring, but 2 separate ones. So I also had the opportunity to visit the Motlow Automation and Robotics Center Wednesday. And so that sits in Upper Cumberland, but me and Becky and Sean and Wendy, we've had discussions about how we can partner. So further meetings will happen. I was in talks with Fred, and I'm probably going to butcher his name, Rasco. He's the Dean of Career and Technical Programs. We had great discussions Wednesday because I think that's a game changer. Even for us sitting in Southern Middle with our Tennessee Higher Ed coming to Lawrence County, it's going to be great. So hopefully 6 months from now, a year from now, we'll have some more data from that.
Other questions?
You know, I'm going to ask
That's
about the waiver. So you guys are deciding to take the waiver, and I think I really appreciated, one, I want to call attention to the fact that you actually set a goal for pathway certifications in your plan of 10 high schools, and they got 27 high schools to apply.
28.
So 28 high schools to apply. So a huge shout out there, and I think you and Tracy being very connected as a model for other workforce boards to be close to that pathways coordinator. And also a shout out on the work-based learning support. I would encourage you to have more specifics about those in-school youth programs where you have the foot in the door, either with the pathway certification or with your transition programs for special education students. I think you can expand those through the pathway certifications into more robust work-based learning for all students. And I think your mechatronics pathways, et cetera, that you're looking at will filter into.
And we actually, we have talked to several other high schools. They have just not, we've presented the idea. Fayetteville actually bought in, so they're going to start. So hopefully we will have more high schools follow that trend in Southern Middle. To the in-school and out-of-school youth, we actually have a technical assistance 2-day meeting with Carly Garrett and the state team next week, because we know there's room for improvement. So we're kind of, assessing what are we not doing, what are we doing great, what are we kind of behind in. So we're trying to be proactive with our youth program.
I think Tracy could probably give some support there in terms of the early post-secondary that you've got. How can you support with wraparound, training accounts, et cetera, for these students?
Yes, Tracy's been great for us.
Excellent.
So.
Well, Selena and Wendy, thank you for a good presentation. Looks like you're in the right path. Okay, let's hear from East. Bill Walker, Executive Director.
Thank you for the invitation. My name is Bill Walker. I assist in directing and planning the activities of the local workforce board for East Tennessee. Darlene Ely is the Regional Director of the East Tennessee Local Workforce Development Area, and Darlene is unable to join us today, but she's watching through the live streaming. So hello to Darlene. The East Tennessee Workforce Development Area is a combination of three former workforce areas. Area 2, which we took 7 counties from, Area 3, 1 county, and Area 4, which we combined 8 counties for a total of 16 counties. The East Tennessee Local Workforce Development is the largest area by geographic in the new realignment. You can see here we're 51% of the population of the total East Tennessee region. Population growth of 34,000 past 5 years. Population growth for the next year is about 28. Next 5 years is 28,000, and that's about a 2.3% growth for the region. Our economic status, 3 different columns here with transition counties, at-risk counties, and distressed counties. There are 8 counties in the transition, 5 counties at risk, 3 counties distressed. The region contains 20% of the state's distressed counties, and for those of you who want to know what a distressed county is, it's one county that is in the bottom 10% of the economic development in the United States. An at-risk county is in the 10 to 20 quartile of distressed, of economically developed counties. We make up, as I said, 20% of the distressed counties and 17% of the at-risk counties for the entire state. The counties that have a single star have an American Jobs Center affiliate site. The counties that have a double star are our comprehensive centers. So you can see that out of the 16 counties, we have 13 American Jobs Centers currently. Labor force breakdown, the most important number is the third one down, labor force. Out of 1 million people in the area, 1 million working age people, about 580,000 currently work, 560,000 are employed, 20,000 unemployed. There's 211,000 children in the region. So that leaves 442,000 people that aren't in the workforce, which equates to about a 57.3% labor participation rate. The state's labor participation rate is 58.4, so we are behind that, and the nation's labor participation rate is about 63.2%. The industries in our area, our customers. The first 2 graphs on the left-hand side, I put in here to show you that we have a at-risk labor force because we have almost 400,000 people retiring soon, and the pipeline has 235,000 people replacing them with millennials. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Additionally, racial diversity in our area is lacking. In an area our size, the typical racial diversity is over 480,000 people. The racial diversity we have is about 150,000 people. Our industries, about 95% of the industries in our region are small businesses, hiring 1 to 49 people. The number of jobs you see, there are 57,000 businesses in our area, and job growth for the next 5 years is a healthy 6.6% per year. Our partners are divided into 3 areas on this table and want to talk about the new partners because of time. Tennessee Department of Corrections is a brand new partner in the East Tennessee Local Workforce Development Area. We'll talk about that in greater detail in a minute. We are members of all 16 chambers of commerce in our region, and what that gives to us is proprietary information of human resource directors for every business that is a member of the chamber. It also gives us direct access to learning, lunch and learns, other meetings that the chambers have. Libraries have been a brand new partner for us. We look to build access points through libraries. Right now, we're building one in the Knox County Library that will serve downtown homeless and downtown out-of-school youth. Morgan County is also asking us to build an access point at their library, as well as Monroe County. Transition School to Work, a new partner for us. We are working with the Voc Rehab contractor who is working in 5 of our rural counties, Transition School to Work. I'm meeting Monday in Granger County. I met last week with Jefferson County, and the goal there is to work with disabled students in school, putting them to work in work experience opportunities and on-the-job training. We're involved with the Rural Opioid Response Consortium, which is a UT concern. It's a grant-based program looking at how to interdict opioid addiction in our area, which is a scourge. We're also working with local governments, the jails, the corrections piece of local government, whether it be child and family court, child support court, juvenile court, drug court, and misdemeanor courts as well. We're working with 16 local school systems, CTE in each school system. We are being introduced to those individuals through members of our board. Our board has a strong representation of career and technical education on its, in its constitution. At 8%, it's the 3rd most represented group in our board is CTE. East Tennessee Development District, the executive director of the area sits on the board of its planning committee for the next 5 years. And finally, the Appalachian Regional Commission, we are signees to a new grant through Appalachian Regional Commission to provide workforce services in 5 of our rural counties. Input into our local plan. We built our local plan based on a survey of 75 employers, and the most important thing we found was what was lacking and what was desired in the workforce. We found also, of course, the high risk for retirement, and from that we also did a SWOT analysis. Some of our stakeholder meetings, you can see the partners in that. We hold stakeholder meetings on a regular basis. The One Stop Operator holds a monthly stakeholder meeting of American Job Center partners. We hold a regional meeting quarterly with our local partners, and we hold a regional meeting quarterly with our regional partners. Another thing that builds into the input of the local plan and keeps it fresh is constant customer surveys of our people and our clients in the AJC. The SWOT analysis reveals that the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of our area. You'll notice that affordability, skilled workers, and location are some of our strengths, but if you look over at the threats, we have wages, aging population is against skilled workers, regional economic development is a threat if it doesn't get carried through, and rural services is also a threat. Opportunities are employment growth. We mentioned a 6.6 rate of employment of employee growth. The Rural Task Force initiative is also a very strong opportunity for us, broadband collaboration in our rural areas and health initiatives. Our service delivery network. We have a strong rural presence with 16 American Job Centers, and we hope in the very near future to build out those other 3 counties that we're missing, Jefferson, Union, and Granger, with either specialized AJCs or affiliate AJCs or access points. We have a co-location of partners within our centers at our American Job Center comprehensives. We have the required partners of SNAP, Voc Rehab, adult education, and also through some of our, 3 of our affiliate sites, we have that team, those team members as well, with Voc Rehab, adult education, and SNAP in our affiliate centers. We're built into functional teams in our area. The mobile coach is also a resource. Transportation services are provided through our Human Resource Agency through the Jobs Access and Reverse Commute Plan. That gives free access to transportation to people who are traveling to and from work. It even drops people off at a mother who is bringing her child home after swinging by the daycare center after work to pick up her child. We'll stop at the grocery store and get the groceries and the diapers that she needs before we take her home. Lastly, on this slide, I want to mention the online community asset mapping guide. We are in the process of building an online asset mapping tool that will contain all of the community resource guides for our 16 counties. Those community resource guides offer information about daycare, health, transportation, all the support services that we need to break the barriers that prevent people from going to work. We want that tool online for the community and for our career specialists to use in referring our clients to those services. We are in the process this summer of using some CTE and/or transition school to work students in an internship to build the community asset mapping guide. Just our area by the numbers very quickly. You can see 8 Board of Regents, 16 school systems, 16 governments, 56 local governments, 21 AJC partners, 10 state agencies, 2 human resource service agencies, and a number of community-based organizations in our counties. The sector strategy is informed by the workforce research that I mentioned to you, and also the regional labor market analysis, career pathways development, the K-12 clusters, employer needs, and economic development insight to yield a sector strategy that, when you compare it to the governor's plan, the East Tennessee Regional Plan, and the Innovation Valley Plan, they all overlap, and our sector strategies in our area are manufacturing, business services, professional services, healthcare, transportation, hospitality, and building trades. Our priority populations are those that you've seen in the last 8 presentations. They are by federal law. The last 2 we are passionate about: reentry and recovery and at-risk youth. We'll talk about reentry and recovery at the end of our presentation. How are we going to get to there? With work-based learning through apprenticeships that Denise is driving that. Also work-based learning through OJT. Expanding our AJC coverage is another way. We've mentioned that. Co-enrollment of eligible individuals. We've mentioned that through our partners at our centers. The business services team is an integral part in expanding our outreach to partners. And finally, the asset mapping and the regional planning. Our reentry population is seen here. The percent of the labor force is about 3.0%, and we're already seeing a number of employees hiring people that are currently incarcerated or who have recently left prison. I want to talk about the Morgan County Correctional Facility story that we have in our area. The Morgan County Correctional Facility is one of 9 Tennessee Department of Corrections institutions. It had approximately 2,500 inmates. 2 weeks from now, TCAT will begin enrolling people in welding and mechatronics and construction programs behind the bars within the prison, and the students will receive a dual certificate from TCAT and from the state TDOC, and the citing of this behind the bars instruction figured very prominently in the recent decision to place a 300-person bed. Is it?
Just, yeah, finish your thoughts. Yeah, you're fine.
I've got one more slide. Let's go to it.
All right.
The other encouraging story is the Scott County Jail story, and that is that in Scott County, the sheriff has allowed, the sheriff has participated with us in releasing 20 students 4 hours a night, 4 nights a week to get training in welding, and when they finish, they'll walk across the street and go to work for Great Dane. Another thing is that the Morgan County Sheriff is now on board with sending clients in his care to Tenier Industries for a work shortage that they have. So we're putting inmates to work already. Questions? Penny?
Yes, you knew I'm going to ask about youth, and I was really happy to hear you say how passionate you are about this area, and to see the representation on the board from career and technical education directors.
We have two out of 25 members that are career and tech educators. One is a supervisor, the director of career and tech ed.
Excellent. I was looking for more detail on what those actual activities look like. And so you mentioned work-based learning. I was not sure if there was other, what specific details to some of those in-school and out-of-school youth activities, or partners that you work with to do those.
Well, our contractor is responsible for recruitment and training of those individuals. The definition of work experience is that it is an education program to get you ready for a job. So we're placing students on jobs, monitoring them, and attempting to build job readiness and appreciation for work through job placement in work experience. In the transition school to work, that is in its nascent stage, and I'm beginning to build a network of individuals through our contractor with UT and Voc Rehab in working with the disabled students, putting them into work situations as well.
Any other questions for Bill?
Thank you.
Good work. So I think what I would like to do, first of all, thanks to all of these presenters for coming very well prepared today with your presentations and working to meet the requirements that we talked about in the last board meeting. Thanks to Denise and her staff for helping this board take a look at what we had to review today, and with their recommendations, it looks like we're good to move forward according to what they recommend, that all of the additional presentations today have, with direction and recommendations and insight, have gotten their plans ready to move forward. So what I would do is I would recommend, I would accept rather a motion for all three of the regions represented today to be approved, unless anybody wants to individualize those approvals. Okay, I have a motion to approve all three, seconded by Jason. Any discussion? All right, with no discussion, all in favor of approving the plans as presented, say aye. Any opposed? All right, they're approved. Thanks, teams, for putting those together, and again, for great presentations today. Thank you. Okay, pressing on, we get to hear a fiscal update from Ivan Greenfield, Assistant Administrator. Thanks, Ivan.
Thank you, Chairman Berry. Good afternoon. Let me start with just echoing what was already said by our Commissioner. Just thank you all for being here and your support and your services and helping Tennessee be #1 in this workforce development space. We couldn't do it without all of you here in the room. So hopefully I can break this down, this PowerPoint down into bite-sized chunks and make it easily understandable. There we go, yes. Okay, so basically, this is in two sections, two broad sections. We're going to do a fiscal review, and then we'll look at the proposed budget for our state reserve funding for PY19. We're going to probably be tossing around some acronyms that might be a little unfamiliar. So when we're talking around PY, like 19, we're talking about program year. Next year, that would start with July 1st through June 30th of 2020. And so, if there is any clarification needed around any of the jargon, I apologize up front, and we'll try and keep everybody on task. So in the fiscal review section, we'll be looking at where our funding comes for our workforce services programs. We'll be looking at where that funding goes to. We'll take a look at the pass-through funding specifically, and then some participant enrollment data, and then minimum requirements under WIOA for use of those funds. And then with again, the second part of that being a proposed funding budget for our state reserve funds, and we'll explain a little bit more about what that is as we go through the presentation. So where do the funds come from? Basically, our funds are 100% federally funded. The bulk of those funds are what's called formula funds, and that's basically that the descending appropriations are based on some formula factor, right? So when we look at under our WIOA program, we look at like the youth program, there are three factors that go into that. They look at those factors are based on unemployment stats as well as low income stats. With the youth, it's the three factors look at unemployment, excess unemployment, and disadvantaged youth in that category. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the presentation. But from here, you can see that the other second funding allocation are discretionary, and that's something that we're looking to expand on. We're looking to do more discretionary grants. Those are more awarded on a competitive nature. Usually the grantee puts them out. There might be a certain number of awards within that allocation or application, and then it's based on first come, first serve or other things along in that application process. And so we see that the whole presentation will be basically on a two-year approach, PY18, which is current year, and that's through third quarter or March 31st. And then the projected numbers are based on a two-year preceding average of funds that we received in PY16 and 17. And so the projected numbers do not include any of the discretionary awards because those will fluctuate, year to year. And so this is basically a list of the numbers received by program. You see that in the PY18, we received roughly about $90.6 million. Again, I mentioned that there's a discretionary on a trade and economic work grant that we have there of about $7.7 million. But year over year, we're averaging around $82 to $84 million in formula fund grants that we receive. And you see that the bulk of those are primarily on two programs, our WIOA program, which have three sub-programs underneath it, and Wagner Pizer. And then the other programs make up less than 20% of those funds. And so that's pretty much it with that. Looking at where the funds go, we see that there are two categories there. When we look at what the state receives or what the workforce services divisions receive to administer the programs represents about a third of the funding, or about $16 million in our 2018, and then change my sheet here. Right. I have my glasses on and I still can't see. But about 25 million of that in the projected 2019. And so, again, the projections are based on the costs are a little different. We looked at the percentage, and the next slide will show it a little better. But we looked at the percentage by cost category. So like say salaries and benefits, or salaries were 12% in the 1 year and 16% in the second year, then you had an average of 14%. And we applied that to the projected 80 million that you see there for P19 to get our projected costs for P19. And so when we look at our costs as far as what it costs for us to administer the grants, again, I said it was about a third of the total cost. When we look at what goes out to the local areas, you see 66% of 47 in P18 and 30 in piece 18, and then 54 in P19. And so the next slide, again, just kind of listed out by cost category. You can see year-to-date on 2018. The biggest thing there, again, is we talked about looking at those pass-through funds that go out to the local areas. You can see that year-to-date, it's about $30 million. When you project that out over the year, you look at another $10 to $11 million, or 40 to 41 million. You see that we're far off from what has been paid out in the past. And so that's the trend that we're seeing, that expenditures are down, reimbursements are down, and other costs are down. And as we go through the slide, we see that when we look at that actual 30 million and how it's split out over the reimbursements, that blue piece on the left represents actual reimbursements under the awards, and the orange piece equates those their actual reported cost by service category. And so, and just looking at that 30 million that we looked at on the previous slide, of that, plus 90% out into Title I, that 28 million that you see under the blue side there, just above the 30 million. When we look at that as far as service provisions, you have a slightly different number of about 29.5. Again, that 29.5 is under the orange, and that's the 3 plus 6 months, right? So there's slight difference, again, reported versus reimbursed. So just a slight difference there. But when you look at that compared to past expenditures, last year, the total expenditures were at $45.5 million. And so you see that being at 30 million, or 29.5, projecting out to about 37, 38, we're, again, not just participant costs, but program costs are down as well, some 20%. So again, just a trending in the numbers is seeing that, and we have some thoughts around why the numbers are low. You know that we had this thing called realignment that occurred, and some of the local areas, we'll see some of these in the numbers ahead, but some of the local areas kind of, we had put out a waiver to allow for local areas to a waiver around their 80%, and we'll talk about the minimum percentages here in just a second. Let me actually put that slide up. But before that, excuse me, I'm getting ahead of myself. Before that, let me follow the order of the slides. We're looking at participant costs, and what you see here are participant costs in this, that blue one on the left at the bottom as current year, that the participant numbers are kind of flat, right? You're seeing like 1,300, around 3,000 each quarter. When you look at that versus the 28 million in program costs versus the 28,765, you get a participant cost of about 1,000 through the third quarter. And you see prior years are 1,300, and it just shows that that's just stagnant growth or flat numbers in the number of participants served there. Moving forward, this next slide looks at, so in our oversight committee, we have another packet that's probably, I'm sure it's in your folder there, but it looks at what we call the report card, and it looks at some additional things like timeliness in reporting, accuracy in reporting, and minimum requirements. And so in this fiscal presentation, we kind of wanted to focus on those numbers that impact the money, right? And so here you see the MPCR, which are minimum participant cost rate, which is state policy that 40% of program dollars would need to be expended on direct participant costs. And when you look at the 9, you see that 4 of those areas are below that 40% MPCR. Out of school, you'll see that there are some a blue font there, and I just was advised earlier that northeast and, is it southeast? Northeast, northwest, excuse me, kind of swapped here, but the blue font represents that the areas that took advantage of the 50/50 waiver on in-school, out-of-school. So in essence, there's just one area there, the one area in red, that's not meeting the in-school, out-of-school minimum requirement. And so when you look at that next column, 20% work experience on the WIOA, you see that 2 areas are actually not meeting it. We've been reaching out to those areas to understand why there's actually 0 reported, and there were some issues in their reporting that they're correcting. And then you see the 80%, I got ahead of myself talking about the 80% waiver. So what that is the local areas receive their funding for 2-year intervals. That first year, they have to obligate at least 80% of the funding received. And so any difference, right, so if they only obligated 78%, 2% would be recaptured and reallocated to those areas meeting the 80%. And so based on these projections through March 31st, you see all the areas there, six areas, if not for the waiver, would be subject to recapture. And that recaptured amount, you see a total of $12 million, almost $13 million there. And so, again, showing that reimbursements are down, expenditures are down. And again, we, though, have been making a more concerted effort. Deputy Thomas talked about it earlier, having provided technical assistance, office visits to 3 of the local areas, a multitude of conference calls with the local areas to try and help get them where they're not having issues around meeting minimum requirements or other issues around reporting. It's a work in progress, and we think that, or I believe that as you go into the year end and into the first quarter, we should see these numbers rebounding once we've had a chance to flush out the impacts around realignment, right? So we'll certainly have some, hopefully, a better picture come our August, if not August, November reporting. So that's that concludes like the first section of the presentation around the numbers for our allocations that we received. The next part goes into the state reserve funds, and the state reserve funds are how we state reserve funds represent what we refer to as like the 15% state reserve. And so basically there's allocations from, once we get our Title I, Title III allocations, a percent of each of those allocations are held back for statewide activities. And so in the Title I, there are 4 percentages that it's in that bottom part of the slide. There's 5% that's held back for administration of the grants. There's 10% programmatic, and then there's up to 25% that could be held back from the dislocated worker allocation for rapid response activities. And so when you add all those together, in this slide, what you're seeing, though, is the actual overall allocation for PY19. And then what you see here in this allocation is that we lost some funding of $4.4 million, and that was based on the allocation factors I talked about earlier. When in PY 18, our allocation for all of the 3 for adult, the 3 for youth, and the 5 for dislocated worker summed up to about 1.6 million participants. And in PY 19, we saw that 1.6 drop to 1.1, or about a 27% decline. And that's where you see the reduction in that 4.3. But also it shows the percentages by program of what those reductions were. The impact on the State Reserve Fund, which is shown on the next page, is that on average we receive somewhere between $9, $10 to $12 million in State Reserve, again comprised from the Title I and Title III. You see Title I is 9.2 and 1.2, the 10% from Wagner-Pfizer that can be used for state or reserved for statewide activity. You saw the amount of the impact on the reduction in the allocations, the factors allocations for those programs is about 760,000 decrease in our last year's funding versus this year's State Reserve funding. So when we look at the budget piece, it's this $10.4 million plus what's called carryover funds. And so the awards are a multi-year award in these 2 programs. And in any funds that's not exhausted in the year that it's awarded, carry over up to 3 years. And so you see here the 2 preceding years of P16, program year 16, program year 17, you see carryover funds of $775K, $5.6 million, and then in P18, which is current year, $3.8 million for a total of about $10.3 million in carryover that, along with the $10.4 million that we see for P19, that's the budget that we're proposing, the $20.7 million for this P19 budget. And when we look at this next slide that talks about where the money came from, we just talked about that. Of that $20 million, we back out the 2.7, which is 2.4, which is the administrative cost, and that leaves a budget of $18 million for the proposed activities just below that. As far as where the funds are going, we've set aside $5 to $7 million to fund governor initiatives around reentry, around career technical education, regional training centers, and the like. And then economic development is kind of replaced. In the last couple of years, we put out CBG funding. 2 years ago it was $3 million. Last year was $5 million. But we didn't see effective utilization of those funds. Last year we saw more than 50% of those funds not expended. And so putting it into the economic development bucket allows for us to support activities in the local area as they come available. And then programmatic monitoring, which is a required activity under WIOA. Single audit that's done by the comptrollers. Denise talked about those findings that we had last year. It's about $1 million. PAR monitoring, PAR going out and reviewing the programs to make sure they're maintaining program integrity. Another $350,000. Then when you look at our systems administration piece of about $4.6 million, we have our VOS system, which reports out on our federal performance numbers, our participant costs. That's a multi-year deal of about $14 million, but that first year is only 2.7. We have an option to renew those after it's a 2-year with an option to renew in the 3rd and subsequent years up to 5 years. There's another module that we're adding, a big interview, which is participant facing to practice interviewing skills. And then this SAS reporting is just going to be a model that allows us to be able to report more vibrantly numbers around data migratory patterns, things of that nature from region to region. And so we're excited about that. And then our grants management system currently is through a vendor, Dulles Technologies. However, and just looking at how the system is growing, how we're expanding, just to feel that that system doesn't have the capacity to smaller shop. And so we're looking at upgrading the system. There's also some functionalities that's missing as far as that's needed by the local areas. They can't really get reporting out of it, timely reporting. We have to, at the state level, kind of provide that information for them. And so this will allow for better integrations among the systems, a better reporting, and better functionality across the board. And so that's kind of where the initiatives that we see the money going as far as the PY19 State Reserve budget. This will be coming up later for a vote by the board as Vice Chair Hatcher presents on the Oversight Committee topics. Any questions?
Questions, comments?
Ms. Axford?
What is the timeline for the new technical pieces to the
For
computer?
the grants management system, we're hoping to be able to do something by end of year, so that we can start January 1st. The other pieces, the SAS is still probably around the same timetable for that piece as well. We're still working with the vendor to kind of hammer that out.
Just a point of clarity, we're not asking the board to vote on the grants management system because that has to go through a different grouping for state oversight. We just want it to be transparent on potential costs. So the system that we're using would be an enterprise system that's not specific to our agency. It would be multiple agencies across the state that would use the system. And it's already in conjunction with Edison that we already have, is our projection. And the SAS piece has not been developed. It's a proposal for data. We've been funding to our local boards, MZ and other data products. We're looking to develop a lot of that in-house so that the data can be more specific to the needs of our local boards. And working with the group that's already doing work around unemployment, we're able literally to get data at the track level. And so one of the proposals we saw, they actually looked at each track inside Memphis as an example to look at where the demographics were based on industry. So it's very specific data. It's very high touch. And so we want to make sure that we're not using products that the data becomes a little cloudy as it gets to the county. We want to make sure that it's actual data that's comprised of what we have here within our resources in Wired and also other additional sources. And so that's a proposal for the data, and we're more than happy to have that group demonstrate that for the board or a committee of the board in the future. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise.
Very good. Ivan, thank you. That's good information, and thank you for those metrics and details. All right, let's quickly move to the committee updates, starting with the Operations Committee.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, during the operation, Takesha brought us up to date on the SNAP E&T and the upcoming changes from the Farm Bill. Now it's local and state board engagements requirements. There's memos in the board folder related to USDA and the SNAP program. Second thing we did was a quick overview of the MSFW program by Lance Butler and the number of inspections conducted by the state and how many workers within our state. And then the final thing that we talked about was an introduction of key performance indicators from the state, some soft markets linking the physical and the performance and programs to create a viable workforce. we're hoping in August that we can get the oversight and the operation committee together to talk about soft targets. There was no action taken by our board.
Okay, any questions for Rogers? Okay, for Oversight Committee?
Okay, we have two items that our committee voted to bring to the board for review and approval. The first is the budget for the state reserve funds that Ivan just shared with us. That is that, that about $10 million. I don't know what slide it was on. The 18.2 million and how those funds will be used. And so our committee voted to bring that to this board to approve that budget.
Okay, so seeking a motion to approve the budget as presented. And a second?
Second, Warren Logan.
Thank you. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving as presented previously, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That budget is approved.
Okay. The other item is you also have in your packet a policy, workforce services policy, sanctions for failure to meet federal and state standards. This policy, as it is in your packet, is different from the one that was sent to you prior to the meeting. The purpose of this policy is to provide more clarity to a remedy and sanctions memo that had previously governed the topic, and it was designed to provide really consistency in the application of remedies and sanctions for certain kinds of issues that might be addressed, such as inaccurate or untimely reporting, infractions around disallowed costs, et cetera. And so we did vote, we reviewed this policy, and then we voted to bring it to the board for approval.
Okay, first, before we ask for motion, any questions about the variances and what was given to us pre versus what was in the?
So I'd like to, if you could review what the differences were based on what we received prior to coming.
Justin?
Good morning. So the difference is there's not a tremendous amount of difference in the policy itself. The attachments that were in the policy I sent on the email, those have been removed. And then the methodology section has changed where it did state that it was based on a point system. Now it's based on a risk assessment, determine low to high risk based on the infraction. Well, the infraction is determine the severity of the risk of that infraction. So if it's, and there's a description in there based on those categories to determine low to high risk there. So such as untimely reporting would be a low, what we consider low risk. And that's determined based on our state policies and federal regulations, as well as the compliance supplement that's referenced in that paragraph as well.
Okay. And who determines the level of risk?
So that would be something that would review of the requirements in policy and based off the compliance supplement on what's considered high or low risk there, we'd make a determination at the Department of Labor or the State Workforce Board, depending on the severity of the infraction.
Thank you.
Any other questions about that? I think the risk assessment was really just to make it, Ann, correct me if I'm wrong, just to make it a little more user-friendly to understand the metric of that. Is that right? Okay. All right. All right, well then, do I hear a motion to accept the policy as presented coming out of the committee? Jason, a second. Second, thank you. Any other discussion about that? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That policy passes. Okay, any innovation, I'm sorry, anything else coming out of that committee? Okay, thanks. Innovations Committee?
Mr. Chairman, there was, nothing came out of the committee that requires a vote. However, we did have 4 discussion items. One dealt with a new concept for servicing the public, which was a virtual American Job Center. It enables individuals to receive assistance while using Jobs for Tennessee in real time and career specialists. And if the determination is made that the individuals need help or require some help, then they're referred one-on-one to what is called the brick and mortar, which is the actual American Job Center. And then lastly, it allows services to be provided in a more efficient manner. And then in addition to that, of course, there was discussion regarding even some recommendations how to update that software. So Holly Jennings made the presentation to the committee, and it was well received and with some recommendations going forward. The second one dealt basically with what we call best practices in the reentry system, and there were about 4 objectives of that program. One was to reduce a recidivism rate by 10% below the statewide average. Another one was the state will provide services to approximately 15% of the estimated 1,000 inmates. And the third objective is that through a coordination of services, the TDOC employment specialists and the AGC's business service team will seek to increase employer penetration performance outcome by 20%. So those are things that were discussed. The third one was the Campbell Strong Grant, which is with Fort Campbell. And right now, it appears that about 134 participants have been served, both from the standpoint of soldiers that are exiting the system as well as spouses. And about 300 to 350 soldiers are discharged every month from Fort Campbell. So there's a nice population there for those services to be extended. And then lastly, an apprenticeship grant that hopefully will be awarded in July. I think some information is due around June, but it's about $1.4 million, which will enable us to promote apprenticeship throughout the state and hopefully provide those skills necessary to meet the employment demands. So that was the essence of the Innovation Committee meeting today.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Warren? All right. Any additional comments, Commissioner?
No, again, I want to thank you for being here. I greatly appreciate your time. I know we ran over a little bit, and I do want to say that we are starting next week to visit all the regions of the state, and we'll be in Memphis starting on Tuesday and spend a few days in West Tennessee. So we look forward to seeing you out there.
Any other comments?
Very quickly, Mr. Chairman, one of the actions that we will embark upon based on the suggestions of the board is that in addition to the presentation and approval of the plans, there is a requirement for this board to be updated on how those plans are being implemented. And so we will arrange with the local boards for an update. Some will be in August, some will be the following meeting to provide updates on how those plans are being implemented. And if they're not meeting the actual targets in their plan, some type of corrective action plan on how that should be determined. So we'll follow up with the local areas on that and make sure the board has that information at the next meeting.
Very good. Well, again, thank you for your investment in our state and the people of our state. Thank you for your endurance in today's meeting. And but that means it was good discussion and it was quality discussion with good questions, and I appreciate your engagement in that. So thanks for everybody for their participation. Have a great weekend. Drive safely.